Hello and welcome. My name is Brian McAvoy.
And I'm Tim Shank. This is Two Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Twin Cities Plus, creating an intelligent, capable, and resilient community. Today we're going to talk about failed projects. Projects that have seen some work or publicly have gotten started, but they haven't reached a functional prototype.
Now, we weren't planning to single anyone out, but I couldn't help but want to talk about someone I know who has publicly failed more projects than anyone else, and that's me.
I'm all for picking on Brian.
Yeah, it's quite a trend around here. The first one I was going to talk about is a fairly simple one that just met problems that I did not foresee. Murphy's Law just took me out behind the building and just kept beating my head in with this one. It was a Cyborg heart rate monitor. The way this project was supposed to work is it was going to use a simple, cheapy Chinese heart rate sensor that looked at the skin response and fed back that data to a microprocessor or a microcontroller. The output from that was going to be an electrical coil, a electromagnetic coil, which would vibrate and stimulate a implanted magnet. So it would only be useful to people with implanted magnets, hence the Cyborg heart rate monitor. The biggest problem I encountered with this, besides having no documentation for these heart rate sensors, was when I tried to activate the coil, it drew so much power that it caused the rest of the project to weaken. And if that light on the heart rate sensor is not very consistent, it gives bad readings all the time. So naturally...
Wait a minute.
Yeah?
Can you go back? How did it weaken the project?
It drew so much power that it starved the rest of the devices of power. So this heart rate monitor, which is a neat little circuit board, all of a sudden it didn't have enough power to operate properly.
Gotcha.
And so naturally this caused more problems, and I tried different things. I tried a separate voltage regulator for it. I tried a larger power supply. I tried powering the coil from a different power supply and just had no friggin' luck with this thing. I beat my head over it and just got nowhere. I was so ashamed of that when I never even put it on my blog.
So let me understand. You are reading the pulse and then outputting that to an implanted magnet in the same person. Was that the goal of it?
The goal of it was really cool. The reason I was inspired is because I was talking to a guy on the biohack forum, and he referred to himself as a street medic. And I heard that term, and I'm like, I want to help this guy. That seems so cool, because it sounds like something's right out of Shadowrun. So what he does is he goes to places like protests, and he makes sure that people are healthy. He makes sure they're not getting dehydrated. He makes sure that they're not getting beat up. And so he occasionally has to check a heart rate, and that's not the easiest thing to do. If somebody's, maybe a little belligerent or scared or dehydrated and not having their wits about them, they might not react great if you start reaching for their chest, to put a stethoscope on them or something. But these heart rate sensors can just read pulse off of a forearm or a finger or an ear, just about anywhere with exposed skin. So I intended to make him a glove where he could just reach out, put his hand on the person's forearm and get their pulse and know if their heart is beating erratically and make a medical judgment call based on that information. But I couldn't get the dumb thing to work.
Are you planning to revisit that, or just to do that again, to resume, or is that just gone forever?
If I get some kind of inspiration and I wake up one morning and just go, oh, here's what I need to do, yeah, I'd pick it up. I've got all the parts just sitting in a tote somewhere. So yeah, it could be picked up, but unless God himself intervenes, it's probably not going to happen. It's a failure.
Okay. So what's next on the list?
Probably my most notorious implant, which, well, I shouldn't call it an implant because it was never implanted, because it was never developed. It's an implantable compass that doesn't require a battery. So a lot of people on the forum have talked about an implantable compass because it would give you a sense of direction, a very real new sense. And that to me was exciting. I have an abysmal sense of direction. I've lost my car a couple times, and it's awful. It's embarrassing. And now I'm telling everyone about it. So I really wanted to make this thing that would give me a better sense of direction, because I've heard people who have used wearable compasses that they get this internal map that they feel like they can't get lost. And that made me pretty jealous, because I want that, because I have the opposite.
Sure.
And so I had all this huge iterative design process where I started off with these simple cobbled together devices made out of brass, aluminum, and plastic, and of course magnets. And no matter what, I could not get a haptic compass, much less one that was small enough to be implanted. I bought myself a 3D printer. My primary purpose of buying a 3D printer was to make this implantable compass prototype. And even that was not enough to do it. And people who have read the website and were journalists have publicly stated that I've had this implanted, and it hasn't even been prototyped. And it's a little embarrassing that when I search my name in Implantable Compass, there's all these top 5 biohackers who have grinds you won't believe and stuff like that. And I'm like, yeah, you sensationalized something that didn't actually happen. So that's a bummer. And I've been working on that one for several years. And I keep waiting for that inspiration to happen. I keep thinking about it every so often. And without divine intervention, that one's a failed grind.
So there's with your implantable compass, there's nothing that's going to revive that, and you don't have any plans when technology gets to a certain point when you're able to get to that titanium printer or something like that?
Unless something clicks in my head that just epiphany. I don't know what to do. I haven't been able to come up with a design that works. I haven't. If I could build one that was the size of a toilet paper roll, but it worked, then I could work on miniaturizing it. But I haven't even done that, and it sticks in my mind as something that should be possible. There's no logical reason it can't be done to build a haptic compass with only mechanical parts, but that inspiration has eluded me. So, hey, if anyone's got an idea, I will listen. I will listen closely, and I will tell you what I've done. I've been very open about it on my blog. If you want to follow the process and see what I've done and make suggestions, I'll give you my personal phone number. You can give me a call. We'll talk. So those are just straight up. I'm just putting those in the failure bin.
Okay.
And there are some that are currently work in progress. Now, we're recording this in 2016, right at the end. So as far as I know, the ones I'm about to mention have not been successful. But they should be, or they will be eventually.
Like what, for instance?
That would be the Bluetooth headset. The reason I picked this one is because it was featured on MTV, one of their programs of Real Life, I'm a Cyborg. And at that time, it had been developed, but there was not a working prototype that could be implanted. So I believe that the inventor is going to make this succeed. But as of 2016, it has not been successful. And I've spoken with the inventor. He's a very bright guy, and he's very dedicated to this. And I believe it's going to happen, but not yet. So hopefully soon, because I, like a lot of grinders, really, really want this for myself as well.
I'm not familiar with this project. So it's an implantable Bluetooth.
A Bluetooth headset. So it would go under the cranial skin, and it would be a bone conduction kind of speaker. And I think he intended to have a microphone, but I can't imagine that wouldn't be muffled. Anyway, so he could get, music, text alerts, phone, all that right through his implant. And it would, of course, charge with inductive charging.
So my question on that is what is the benefit of that and maybe this isn't the right episode for it, but I'm going to ask it. What is the benefit of that over, say, a cochlear implant with a Bluetooth module?
I've done a little bit more research on a cochlear implant, and they actually interface with the actual nerve. And from what I understand, it will destroy any natural hearing you have. And it not only destroys it, but it reduces the, we'll call it resolution of what you can hear. So now if it were just like a bone conduction implant like they do for some hearing aids, that would be different. But those still have an external module because you need to pull them out, charge the battery. So this would be completely self-contained, completely waterproof. You couldn't lose it. Probably couldn't sleep on your side, though.
I've researched this because I would love to have something like this, and I was even considering some medical tourism to get it done. I guess the one that I was looking at is actually a bone stud in the cochlear bone, and on the outs. Mm-hmm. So it didn't interface directly with the nerve. It was just the cochlear bone that had a bone stud, and then there was basically a transducer attached to it on the outside that had a Bluetooth module. It just kind of pop onto to the stud. So that wouldn't interrupt your regular hearing at all, and it doesn't interface with the nerve. So I've always kind of looked at that project and wondered, like, well, why wouldn't you just get a cochlear implant if you can? Which is expensive. When the answers are it's expensive. You can't do it in the United States without medical, without medical buy-in. So that's where I went to the medical tourism. Maybe I could go to Mexico and have it done or something.
Mm-hmm. Hey, I'll go with you. That is totally legitimate, but those still have an external module. You get the bone stud, but that's just a dumb piece of magnetic material or ferrous material that's under the skin. You still have something that's on the outside. You couldn't go swimming with it. Whereas the implantable Bluetooth, it's on you when you're in the shower. It's on you when you're in the pool.
Well, then that makes sense.
Yeah, there's the advantage to that one. But yeah, the implant you were talking about with the Bluetooth module that attaches to your head, that's kind of like a middle ground between a Bluetooth module and a fully implanted Bluetooth headset. So I'm excited to see that one, and I think it's coming.
Yeah, I would certainly get that.
Right. So the next one I want to mention was a Wi-Fi memory module. And the Wi-Fi memory modules that you can get like for your phone, so you can keep an extra 64 gigs of memory with you but not plugged directly into your phone, those are available. Obviously not in implantable form, but they exist. People on the forum have talked about putting that under their skin so that they would always have that memory nearby. And I've seen this come up a couple times, and I've never seen anything come of it. Scope creep seems to be the enemy of these modules. They want to do way too much with it. They want to... They start off with like, oh, I wish I just had this device always near me. And then they start thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to need to add a charger, of course. Oh, I'm going to need to add some temperature monitoring. So that means I need to add a microprocessor. And by the time they're done, it's the size of your arm, and it's totally not viable. So, if somebody were dedicated enough and had the skill set, it's doable. There's no reason it's not. I mean, Wi-Fi will get through your skin, no problem. Mm-hmm. But until that day, I don't see that. I don't see that succeeding.
And you mentioned a term that I'm well familiar with because I work in a large corporate environment and we have very large projects. But maybe and you kind of defined it. But let's talk about scope creep for a second, because I think there's a lot of people who may not understand what that is. So when there's a project, you have a defined piece of work and a defined endpoint. And scope creep is when you change the work to increase the functionality of the endpoint in the middle of the project. And that's something in my world we just do not do, because it just never you can keep on adding things to the point where the project fails. And I think that's where what we're talking about is if you keep on adding, if you don't focus on that initial determined end goal, keep on adding work to it, you may never get to an end goal.
True. Yep. Yep, that's exactly what I was talking about. We just seem to be going up a ladder here because the next one is somebody is always trying to implant a computer. So something that's not a microcontroller. This would be something with like a 32 or a 64-bit processor. And I've never seen that one come real close to something that people would consider worthy to go under their skin. And I think Moore's law is to blame because if you implanted a computer today, in 6 months, that thing is going to be huge and underpowered.
And also, you got to look at what good is a computer under the skin when
Precisely.
we carry phones. Or, it's something we've seen in sci-fi a lot. So maybe it's got the inspiration, but in the end, why would we need to?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's computers are anything but future-proof. A Bluetooth headset, if you upgrade your phone, your Bluetooth upgrades with it. If you implant a memory module, 32 gigs is going to be worthless in a couple years. That's going to be, 32 gigs is going to be like, yeah, I can store a password and a few photos. That's it.
Right.
A computer, it's going to be outdated quickly. But it's certainly doable, and depending on what you want to do.
Right. And contrary to that, an interface that simply lets you read the output from a computer could be very versatile.
Precisely.
And the computing component on the outside could be upgraded very easily. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I can get behind.
Sure.
And the last one has nothing to do with electronics. It's subdermally implanted armor.
Now that is pretty cool. that is pretty cool.
That is some Shadowrun stuff right there, and that, from me, is a compliment for sure. For those of you who don't know, Shadowrun is a futuristic role-playing game which involves a lot of cyborgs. Anyway, I definitely classify this as a work in progress because not only has work been done on it, but stuff has been implanted, and it's actually gotten the implanter into a little hot water with his ex-wife, who has exposed this to a judge in a small town to try and get some custody stuff. It's a gross situation, but as a project, subdermal armor is coming for those who want it, and I think that's super duper cool.
I haven't been following that, and I know who we're talking about here. I don't know if you want to mention the name or anything, especially because there's legal stuff involved. But can you tell me a little bit more about how he's doing that?
He uses a non-Newtonian substance, which, from what I can tell, is basically cornstarch and water, because when you strike it, it solidifies like cornstarch and water, but the rest of the time it's fluid or fluid-like. If he fills like rubber tubes or surgical rubber tubes with this non-Newtonian fluid, it stays where it should, and when it's struck, it hardens. And I think the place that they were installed was the subject's shin. I mean, you could get hit with a baseball bat or kicked and just be like, what's up? That didn't hurt me. Which is, I mean, imagine wearing shin pads all day long, not being encumbered by it, but having that protection. I mean, the shin is just an easy place. It doesn't move a lot. But if you had,
Sure.
Imagine you were in law enforcement or security, you'd have that extra layer of protection that is not obvious. Or if you were a bouncer and somebody punched you across the face and you were just like, yeah, you want to try that again, Marshmallow? Sure. That'd be so intimidating.
Sure. What's next on our list, Brian?
All right, so since we're talking about arming cyborgs here, I have a worthy mention of something that I put on this list, not because I expect it to succeed, but because it sparked a lot of really good conversation that I did not expect. They wanted to do Baraka claws. Baraka is a character from the video game series Mortal Kombat, and he has these ridiculously long claws which extend from his forearm, similar to Wolverine, but instead of being individual claws, it's one giant bone claw. Totally preposterous. But the reason that's there is because people in the forum did not just say that's dumb, don't do it. I thought it, but I didn't say it, thank goodness. Or maybe I did. I read the entire thread and learned so much about why it's not possible that I came out much better for having read it. And it just turns out that those bones cannot support that. They twist funny, and knowing the anatomy of that was valuable information. So while
Sure.
It's a project that is probably never ever going to happen. It was good to read.
Yeah. Well, and there's no shortage of that. I think a lot of it comes from our superhero culture. I've seen projects that are just like, why? But I think in the end, I think people are inspired by the heroes they see on TV, and they're like, oh, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm. I think Baraka's a bad guy, though. But yes, the superhero culture. If people follow my blog or follow me in other media, I am all about superheroes. All about superheroes.
Brian, I don't think we've ever actually given details about your blog, so tell people where to get to it.
24, the numerals 24, 24hourengineer.com. It's a daily blog that I update on what I'm doing, and you can even find links to this podcast there. So give that a follow if you like to read.
Everybody go do that for sure.
Woo. Self-plug.
All right. So do we have any more on the list? I mean, I know we have a lot, and I don't have a whole lot of content to give here. Just comments. I can judge.
Now, there are some crazy ones out there. Ones that just defy reason. And we don't need to get into those because...
Oh, okay. I was going to bring up the hive of insects that somebody wanted to implant in some part of their body.
Yeah, that is one that This is straight out of either an anime or a recent book/movie. But they wanted to have hive creatures living inside their body. So, like a bee swarm they could control.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Yeah, I don't think that even qualifies as a failed grind. That's just fantasy.
This is just pure WTF. Anyway.
We're not to that category yet, are we?
Yeah, we are.
Okay, well,
we started with the Baraka clause. That was at least educational. This is just, okay, I want to see supervillains as much as the next person. I want to see superheroes as much as the next person. And maybe grinders are going to be that category of humanity. But baby steps, people. On top of this, here's an inside joke for the biohack community. Fungus computers. Somebody wanted to program fungus to act as a computer. And I don't know if this was intended to be a biohack in the human interface category or just I'm going to buy a CRISPR kit and program genetic material to act as a computer. I don't know. The person who read it definitely gave off that I'm a talk to my crystals vibe and has not been seen on the forum since.
How much hassle? I mean, how much did people chide them for that? I mean,
it has been mocked for years after it was posted. It is memorable, and I can't even imagine what that supervillain's name would be. Fungus Compu dude. No. Oh goodness, no. Anyway, so if you're on the forum and you recognize that post, I hope you had a chuckle. All right, so with all these failures, the biohacker community has also seen lots of success. Getting people to start their own project without fear of failure. I've had a blast talking about the stuff that has failed, and I've learned considerable skills by just attempting them. People need to start, and people need to go out on a limb and try to make what they think is possible.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be gained by project management processes and just being aware of it. Not if you don't have to go to school or be a PM or anything, but just understanding how to organize things, how to develop your parts list, how to shop, how to actually define stages and benchmarks in your project so that you have short-term goals, things like that. I think that really could benefit, because a lot of us we're just individuals hacking in our own private spaces. We're not necessarily in environments where we're exposed to larger projects that involve multiple phases and things like that. So I think that just being aware of and doing some research on project management practices, what big companies do, or even small companies in some cases, do to manage projects is really helpful. It is for me.
I totally agree. And if you start working on a project, talk to other people about it, because they can give you insight that you might not have otherwise, and it might speed you along. And I've seen this many times where somebody will not necessarily say, "Oh, do this specific thing." They'll just say, "Hey, in the past I've done this," and they go, "Oh my gosh, that was the thing I needed to move forward."
Sure.
And it's incredibly exciting and enabling to get that kind of support and to feel those little successes, because you need to give yourself little successes, or trying to get to the end of a big project is not going to happen.
I agree. And like I say, things like the benchmarks and stuff like that, those are those small-term goals. And watch out for scope creep. Set those goals and stick to those. You can always have a phase 2 or a second part of a project that expands it, but if you never get to the first part that makes it useful, or at least shows some kind of result, you may never get there.
Best example I can think of right off the top of my head is the Bluetooth headset. From what I understand of it, it has never tried to go beyond that. It was going to be a Bluetooth headset with an inductive charging port. That's it. And keeping it that simple is smart, very smart.
Sure. Is there anything we can do to give people, here's how you should start?
The drawing board.
So when you start a project, first you need to say, this is what I want to accomplish.
What do you want to do?
Then you can back up from there and say, this is a step towards that. So that's your benchmark. So if I want to build an implantable mechanical compass, that's the goal. So the first step is develop a mechanical compass. The second step is to make sure then you can make sure that works and that your mechanical design is solid before you start trying to work on the implantable part.
Right. And that's the route I've been trying to go. But yes, that's exactly correct.
And another thing I think that is important is miniaturization. Because that's one thing you may, when you're developing something, you can't develop it miniaturized. Well, you could if you had the right resources and all the right equipment and all that. But first, develop a version that's not small enough that it's going to cause problems with your development process. If you can develop it large, then you can after the fact, you can go back and figure out ways to make it smaller. But if you don't have verification that it's going to work in the first place, you could be developing something in a very small scale and find out it doesn't work. So if you're doing something mechanical, you could develop a large version of the mechanical implant, whatever it is you're planning to do, to make sure that you have all the mechanical issues worked out before you even deal with the challenges that are involved with making it small enough to be implanted.
If your end goal is an implantable, make a wearable first. If you're trying to make a mechanical compass, make one that fits in a backpack or fits on your wrist or straps to your leg, and then worry about miniaturizing it. What next? What do you do after you make that prototype?
Well, once you make the prototype, then you can start, like you say, you start working on ways to implant it. But then there's also things like parts list. You need to identify before you really start all of the different parts you need. And then shopping on top of that, I use a spreadsheet. I use Google spreadsheets for those things. And I put links, I put different versions. And then a lot of times I'll even let that sit and just keep checking prices and keep doing research to see if I can find cheaper versions from different places, a lot of times China, things like that. But if you're just kind of going along and saying, I'm going to need this, so I'm going to buy this, and then try to develop without actually having everything you need in front of you, it just slows the whole process down.
For sure. And make it easier on yourself if you can. Keep notes. The difference between science and goofing around is writing things down.
Yeah.
Let's end on that quote.
Okay. Thank you for listening. We'd like to invite our listeners to email us at 2cyborgs@twincitiesplus.org. And you can spell 2cyborgs, or you can just write the number.
And the best news we've ever had, you can put 2 Cyborgs on your back. We have these ultra stylish hooded sweatshirts with the 2 Cyborgs logo right on the back. You can wear us around all day long. Support your podcast and look fabulous doing it. This is Brian McAvoy.
And this is Tim Shank. You have been listening to 2 Cyborgs and a Microphone, brought to you by Twin Cities Plus, creating an intelligent, capable, and resilient community.
Like, follow, share, +1, and don't forget to subscribe on any of our popular podcast services, including Google Play Music, iTunes, and Stitcher. And then help us to move up the podcast ladder by subscribing and commenting on iTunes. Please.